This is Ann Hill at Dream Talk Radio, and today I am talking to Ryan Hurd, all the way from Philadelphia. Welcome, Ryan.
It's good to be here.
I'm so happy to be able to talk to you in a video chat about your new book. Now, first of all, let me hear from you. There's a couple different products that you have that are new, right? There's the Lucid Immersion Guidebook. Is that part of a larger package?
Right. It gets kind of confusing because it's a digital home study course, but it's really 3 ebooks packaged together. Mm-hmm. And I'm calling the entire thing the Lucid Immersion Blueprint.
Okay. And so that's a study course, so people can actually study with you as well as get all of the material.
I call it a course because it basically lays out a plan that people can follow step by step, and there's a workbook to kind of track your successes and not so successful things, and that's why I call it a course. It's not just a bunch of information that I unload on people, but rather here's how to do it and how to watch for what happens when it doesn't work out so well.
Great. So let's first explain to viewers what lucid immersion is. They may not have heard that exact phrase.
Yeah, it's a kind of a cool phrase that came to me when I was in conversation with my friend Chris Olson, and we were talking about the best ways to encourage more lucid dreams in your life, and we were just discussing this on the phone, and the term immersion kind of came up in the conversation, and then later I was like, that's what it's about. And basically the central concept is that to increase your ability to have lucid dreams, kind of when you want, it's not about one specific tactic or some magic pill that you take, but rather, like learning a language, you want to saturate yourself in a culture to kind of get that lucid living going in your daily life and basically reverbs in your dream life. And that's the central concept.
I really like that idea of having your waking life somehow structured in a way that invites lucidity in dreams. And you have a bunch of, maybe you could start by telling the great story in the guidebook about your trip to Nicaragua and how you discovered the whole thing.
Sure, yeah. Basically, I've figured out that with my lucid dreaming, which is very erratic, I'm not a high density lucid dreamer. I have maybe 2 of them a month on their own accord. In some months I have none, and I've gone 6 months without a lucid dream before. But when I travel, it gets just off the charts, basically. Mm-hmm. And I took this trip to Nicaragua in 2006, and I was in complete culture shock and just totally out of my element. I had to get around, with my terrible Spanish. And just eating new foods and seeing new things, and it just put me in such a high state of excitement and agitation and vigilance, about my surroundings, that my dream life just completely exploded. Huh. And I anticipated this because I've seen this happen before with smaller trips I've taken. So I had brought my my dream journal, and I had a plan. I'm going to study the dreams that I have when I'm on this trip, and I'm going to see how it impacts, the details of the trip. And I ended up, I think something like 100 dreams happened within a 3-week period.
That's remarkable.
And something like 12 or 15 of them were lucid. And then a smaller number of them, I actually had a protocol where I was trying to do a specific, thing in the dream. Mm-hmm. And I had maybe 4 or 5 of those where I actually succeeded. So it was kind of intense, to be honest. It was really intense. And it's not something that I could not live on that level of intensity, for a long time. And that's kind of what the idea of this immersion is. And travel is a perfect metaphor because you're really, everything's up in the air. You're out of your habits,
Right.
You're making new patterns. You're seeing things with fresh eyes. So you're really in that phenomenological moment, or you're really seeing things as they present themselves. And I think that's really the trick to lucidity.
Right. And I mean, I can't even imagine having 100 dreams in 3 weeks, let alone writing them down.
Right.
Like,
How
did you
tough.
get anything done?
Well, Yeah, I basically, a lot of my spare time I spent in a hammock writing my dreams down, and
Yeah,
that's, it really did,
yeah,
cut into the life.
right.
But it was just such a cool feedback system that it worked out. I mean, I was in this trip, I was doing a lot of hiking, and I was out in the sun, so I needed
Hmm.
a downtime anyway. So it was
Right.
sort of a nice way to just channel that energy.
And that really is, I mean, for anybody who's written down dreams on a regular basis, that really is an immersion in the dream world because you are bringing all of that unconscious material into waking, literally with every keystroke or with every movement of the pen. And you talk about that as being one of the sort of foundational practices for having this immersion is basically recording your dreams. Are there any other, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the basics of sleep health and so forth, but just in a nutshell, what else would you recommend to people just for the setup, the basic setup?
The basic setup, I think, does have to do with this, concept of sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
And noticing the way that your sleep patterns naturally are, and then tweaking them a little bit and disrupting those patterns. And that sort of causes this vigilance system that we have to go from the waking world into our dream life, into
Mm-hmm.
REM dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
And so a natural example would be waking up in the middle of the night and doing some reading or some journaling, and then going back to sleep. And this is actually a very common lucid dreaming technique called the wake back to bed method. But that's just one example of many of ways that you can sort of hijack your sleep hygiene for greater lucidity.
Mm-hmm. You have a concept in the book that I liked. I just liked the sound of the phrase, really, but it also has a lot in it, which is cognitive domestication.
Yeah.
I really like that, training the wild oats of the mind or something. You can explain that a little bit more.
Well, I guess the starting place is that when we think about lucid dreams, that often you hear about how we're so aware of what's going on and we're so in control of what we're thinking and feeling. And I take a step back and say, well, actually, so many of our thoughts are patterned from the get-go, in our waking life as well. And this is patterned in our dreams too. But just, we have so many influences from the biology of our species to the culture that we live in, to our family of origin, just social memes, who we talk to that day, our indigestion, just all of these patterns that come together and create these cognitive habits. Psychologists talk about schema theory, how we kind of get locked down to one particular road, and we just travel that one road. And so you've got to break out of this sort of domestication. And that's what this this sort of agitation effect of traveling is so good for lucid dream.
Right. So it's stepping out of the normal patterns and disrupting that in some way.
Right.
And,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So in your book, you have a lot of different things that you talk about. You have mental practices, physical and emotional things that people can do to achieve that structure. I wonder maybe if you could talk about just the whole idea, how do those three things, body, mind, spirit, all kind of tie in to increase the likelihood of lucidity?
Yeah, I had to make a sort of cheesy, holistic framework for the way of getting these techniques together.
It's so common because it actually works. It's an easy way for people to understand a real breadth of practice.
Yeah. Well, so the general idea is that most of us, most of the time can't go travel and soar wild oats cognitively. We have jobs and lives and patterns and responsibilities. And so how to work within these structures of our life and kind of shake it up a little bit, but in a way that's, respecting, our lives and who we are.
Yeah.
And so the mind, body, soul methodology is just a way of saying, hey, our mind, we're just not brains and jars.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness is embodied.
Mm-hmm.
It happens through the body. It happens through our emotional landscape. And it's all connected, and we have to really address these different kind of layers of consciousness to really get to greater lucidity.
Right.
And that's, again, whenever I say lucid dreams, I'm really talking about life too, because the way I frame it, and I'm certainly not the first person to say this, is that the lucid dreams are a fruit of lucid living. If we live our life in a way of greater self-awareness, these dreams can come as a fruit of that work. And often they come on their own accord. It's not when we happen to want them to happen, but when we do some really hard work, emotional work, we break through some projections about other people that are really about ourselves or what we did or didn't do. All this kind of stuff happens on its own accord. And so these are just the methods of kind of seeing it for what they are and then taking them in a structured way so you can build, I guess the building blocks of lucidity in a lucid life.
Right, right. So you have this concept of bounded focus, which I really like. It sort of gives you,
So bounded focus, it's about not working too hard, really. It's about letting dream work be playful, and letting this whole exploration of having more lucid dreams be something that's fun and exciting. And because what happens, to a lot of beginning lucid dreamers and people who've had some successes with lucid dreaming and it's fallen off the map for whatever reason, is it gets very frustrating.
Right.
You try these techniques that used to work, they no longer work. You're doing everything that people say to do, and it's still not happening, and it just becomes this that's not the way that humans motivate, especially self-motivation.
Right.
We've got to do something playfully and do it for a period of time, and then step back and see what happened. And then when the desire manifests again, take stock of what happened last time, see what you can do better or change or improve or switch up, and then do it again. So it's just this idea, and I tie it to this ancient Asklepian method, of the ancient Greeks and their dream sanctuaries, of taking time off and building a secure container. And rest is a big piece of this secure container.
Yes.
And it's funny because we're saying, taking rest from your dreaming life, but I just mean rest from the work of pushing so hard.
It's true. It becomes, if you think, okay, I really want to have a lucid dream, it becomes a task of your super ego. It's yet another way to judge yourself and get under the thumb of the shoulds in your life. And what I really like about your approach is that you say, take a week on and do all the things to stimulate lucidity. Try and immerse yourself in that lifestyle. Have a different diet, make sure you get a lot of rest, have the dream, the dream cues around you, and practice those techniques. And then take a week off. Just simply forget about it. And I think that's so wise, because we sort of get stuck in the hamster wheel of, okay, I'm doing this, therefore what's my return on investment? I should be doing this, getting this right now, and then if you don't, well, I should try harder. But it's completely wrong. It's the wrong part of our brain driving our impulse to lucidity. And I like your program because it gets around that.
And it's not just for lucid dreams, but dream work and any kind of self-improvement that you decide you're going to take on, that super ego, I'm going to improve myself and be who I'm not now. There is that disingenuous element to it that, you're pushing yourself up some hill. Yeah. And you've got to really kind of lay off sometimes.
Yes, that's right.
But there's another thing that happens, and Ken Wilber talks about this a little bit, about how if we continuously, or we spend a lifetime building up these tactics, these mindfulness techniques, they go from being something that we do as a habit to it becomes a trait. It becomes something that just comes naturally. Yeah. And that's kind of the big picture, of these tactics, like the 10-year, 20 years down the road. The kind of things that are in the book are things that people just absorb into their lives. Yeah. And it's funny, they're habits that break you from your habits. But it works, so.
Yeah, it does. If you can actually do it, if you can follow through. That's the only thing you don't have in your whole guide, is like something to make people follow through with their own intention.
Yeah, besides like writing down affirmations, I really can't do too much. I guess I could have people pay me $25 and I'll give them an angry phone call in a month. And
You know, you
yell
go
at you.
to the very threshold of doing that. I mean, this whole, you have the guidebook, you have the workbook, which is beautiful, by the way, really beautifully laid out, where you can, you know, write down everything and keep track as a way to sort of keep yourself with the program. And then you've got, what, about 4 hours of audio? I mean, it's really quite the comprehensive package, so kudos to that.
Thanks. I mean, this is the thing I've been telling people that I wish that I had, 20 years ago, when I was super psyched up about lucid dreaming and I was having a lot of them. But I was also flailing around and getting into some kind of psychologically deep waters that I wasn't prepared for. And I didn't have the mindset for how to understand these experiences. And so I forgot a lot of them because I couldn't actually understand them. And like there's this thing about lucid dreaming culture that I don't particularly like is that there's this focus on the next dream you're going to have. Right? Whereas with most of the dreamwork community, we think about the dreams that we've already had and what do they mean and reflect upon them. So what I try to do with this project is to bring those two worlds together. Here's how to have more dreams, but here's how to absorb them and to work with them. Because those really, that's really what the work is.
I think you're spot on about that. You're absolutely right. Which brings up one more issue, and that is how to turn them off if you have too many. I mean, I actually know some people who are really quite tortured almost. Maybe that's too strong a word, but it's, so maybe you could just give a little bit of an encapsulated version of how to move out of that state.
Well, and it's not something that you hear a lot about in the beginning lucid dreaming community, but there is, some people in some cases where they have too many lucid dreams that become nightmares. They're nightmarish. They feel out of control. These are people who know they're dreaming. And I'm speaking for myself here. I've had plenty of these experiences, and this is a lot of my path too. Knowing that I'm dreaming, knowing that I can wake up at any moment, and yet still that's not enough to be able to face, the terror that is in front of me, and just to how to deal with this and how to turn it off, and why won't it go away? And there's actually some psychologists who say that these lucid nightmares can be destabilizing. And that there can be a symptom of what they call spiritual emergency, in which you hit a crossroads of your life for whatever reason. It can be external or internal, and your paradigm's changing. Something, the carpet's been swept away from you. You've lost your sense of beliefs or your bedrock of the way the world works. It could be a death in the family or just, normal maturation process. And we have to, we start looking around and seeing the world in new eyes, and it's a painful process. In the spiritual community, there's a lot of talk of light and bliss, but there's some dark moments as we kind of change and grow as people throughout the lifespan. And so, in lucid nightmares is something that happens, and so it's basically the same advice that yogis and mystics give to their disciples when they start having like a kundalini uprising that they can't control, or they become so flighty that they cannot take care of their own self. And it's to do things like stop these spiritual practices, stop these cognitive practices, eat more grounded foods, take walks, get back in your body, really get physical again. And of course, be in a community of somebody who you can talk to this stuff with, and just kind of get grounded back in that social reality. And so that I lay that stuff out not to scare off anybody about lucid dreaming, which is something to keep in mind, because there is this whole meme going around of that lucid dreaming can cause like psychotic breakdown, and it's playing with fire, and it's just, it doesn't really bear out.
Anything can be playing with fire.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Watching a movie can be playing with fire.
The people who have schizophrenia have lucid dreams. It doesn't mean when you have lucid dreams you're going to become schizophrenic. It's sort of a logical fallacy. But there's, so sometimes, you don't want to go into a lucid immersion. If you are going through a really tough time, I recommend people, hey, you know, this can wait.
Yeah.
You know, get grounded and really, you know, be with yourself and don't sweat it and let lucidity come on its own accord.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really, really smart. And I'm so glad that you put all of this together. So let's tell people how to find your great stuff. You have your website, dreamstudies.org. Is that the best place for people to get your blueprint, the Lucid Immersion Blueprint?
Yeah, the easiest way to do it is to go to dreamstudies.org and then click on the tab that says My Books. And it's the first thing that pops up, and you can just follow the link from there to the landing page that talks more about the project and has a little video of me explaining some more about it.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me about your book. I'm a huge fan. I give this one about 5 thumbs up. So.
How is that possible?
Hey, it's a dream. It's a dream.
Are we dreaming? Are we dreaming?
Yeah, exactly. So, yes.
Great. Well, thanks, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Take care.